where do we look to get our sense of security from? Is it outside, or are we in contact with our own internal security? And same with belonging. Do we look for belonging on the outside, or are we in contact with our interior capacity for belonging? It makes a huge difference
Oh, those are
if we're,
profound differences.
oh gosh, it makes a huge difference in how we show up in life. And in
Mhm.
fact,
Roxanne Howe Murphy is a best-selling author, pioneering thought leader, and teacher. She studies people and their behavior through the lens of the Enneagram. Roxanne calls the Enneagram a valuable map for understanding the full range of the human condition, and it shows people how their personalities can naturally reinforce their default reactions. Stop a moment and think. What if we became conscious of our default reactions and instead exercised conscious thought, conscious choice? That's what Roxanne helps people do. Please welcome her for a return appearance on Bump in the Road. Roxanne, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us about your new book. What's the story behind it?
hi, Pat, it's great to be here. Um, well, it is a story. It's a kind of a long road. Let me put it maybe in a context. As a retreat leader, coach, teacher, I've talked to a lot of people about their experiences. And particularly, I would say in the last decade, questions would come up like, what is mine to do? I can kind of feeling overwhelmed by all that's going on. And boy, do I hear that question now. What is mine to do? And then generally followed by, can I do it? Even if I knew what that was, can I do it? Do I have the capacity to do it? So I just kind of want to connect that to this book and what this, I think the purpose of this book is. In 2012, so we go back a ways here, I was preparing to do a workshop, actually a session at an international conference on the Enneagram. And I had a big mat laid out on my floor. It's 8 by 8, so it took up a lot of space. I work somatically a lot. And I was with my colleague, Diana Redmond, and we were just kind of sitting in with inquiry, like, how should we approach this session? It's going to be on paradox. It's such a yummy topic. And I can't actually explain how it happened, but I became aware that there were additional lines that I was seeing, or we were seeing on the symbol. And for those of your listeners and readers, viewers who know the Enneagram symbol, there were additional lines that I had never seen before. And it's like, what are these lines doing here? And it was like, what happened was, it shook me up quite a bit. It was like, this is phenomenal. Um, what is this about? And then I began to get really curious about the symbol. And it was additional horizontal symbols on this circle, on this map. And then there was a vertical line. And one of the things that I kept asking is like, well, if this is real, am I making this up? Right. First of all, are we making something up here? Is this really, really coming forward? And then the question came like, well, what is its purpose? And the symbol wouldn't let me go. I just had a lot of questions. What's its purpose? What does it have to? Does it have something to offer to humanity? Does it have something to offer to reducing strife and discord and all the things that may not be necessary in life? Does it have something to offer to our relationship to the earth? What's this really about? And so over the next several years, I could only study a part of it, actually, because it's a kind of a complex circle and a complex symbol. And I studied what I call now portals, and these are horizontal lines on this map, horizontal lines, and there are 4 of them, and they've each been given a name. So I'll tell you what those are later. But each of those portals I could only learn about one of them at a time. That's all I could. That's all I could have. So I was actually leading some retreats on this, and it was great because there were a lot of conversation about what is this, and people were giving feedback and their thoughts and their perspectives. And so the first one was on the bottom horizontal line, which is called sacred holding. The portal of sacred holding. That's all I could. All I could share with people because I knew something about that. I was learning something about that and what it was evoking and what it was offering in terms of, well, what's that capacity? Is there a capacity here that it can help us develop? So over the years, I would like bring in one more portal at a time. And in 2000, probably 2018, I started, or 16 maybe, I started writing about what I was learning and still wondering, am I crazy? Am I, on the right track? And so I really asked for my guidance and really tried to listen carefully and tune to what was happening for me. And when I had a lot of tears, but they were tears of recognizing something that I wasn't even sure what it was, Pat, but I was recognizing that there was some truth here. There was something more than I could actually take in at one time. And so my navigating this process involved really working with myself to see what my blockages were within each portal. Like what was coming up for me that's like, maybe I should stop. No, I'm not supposed to stop. I need to keep going. All right. So I've really been worked in the process of writing this book, The 4 Sacred Portals, Your Journey of Wholeness and Deep Kinship with Life. And I'll just say something about that subtitle, Your Journey of. It's not your journey into. It is what's already within. It's our innate nature is our wholeness, and we are innately, intrinsically interconnected with all of life. And so it is trying to illuminate some of that and bring forth some ways of connecting with it, and lots of examples of how do we connect with those parts of ourselves. So it's a way to get closer to ourselves. And what I actually learned over time was that there was an arc that was created by these 4 portals, the sacred holding. And it's interesting because this is not just an image, it maps onto the body. Okay. So the first sacred portal, holding, I'll just stand up here. So it goes right across below the navel, we call the lower dantian, right? And the second portal is the portal of sacred trust. And that goes across the solar plexus, or what we call also the upper belly. So lower belly, upper belly. And then the third portal is sacred connectedness. And the fourth portal is here, actually, sacred engagement, which also is a discerned engagement. So it's an action oriented, but it's action or non-action, but whatever we take is this is a process for connecting our inner resources, our inner capacities with how we show up in the world. So it is inner work, but beyond the inner work, it's like everything we do ripples out into the world in ways that we don't know.
So
we have impact. I was just talking to someone yesterday who said, I saw a student that I had a few years ago, and they were, I don't know, maybe in a mall or something. And the student came up to her and said, I have to tell you, what you said in that class, that's what guided me to take these next steps in my life. And now I'm going to be going to, I think it was university and what the major was and so on. And this woman said, I had no idea. And I think that would be true for all of us, that we've had an impact. And sometimes it's not Always the intended impact, right?
I was thinking it's not always a positive one, but
It's
hopefully it
not.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's recognizing that we are part of something much bigger and that our being here and how we're connecting to ourselves and through each of these portals helps us to have the capacities to be more discerning in our what we say yes to, what we say no to, how we decide how we're going to engage and how we're going to show up. So I love this part. I didn't know that that's what this book was going to be about. I didn't know that that's what Any Crossings was going to be about. Or Any Crossings is the bigger symbol, and the four sacred portals is a way to enter into this work that is very applicable in day-to-day life. And I can just say, it has changed me. I have a different relationship with myself now than I did, which is, a really kind of a positive thing when you think about spending that many years on writing, but and being with the material and teaching it. So I'm really so grateful that showed up, even though it was a very scary thing for me.
Let's talk about a little bit about each of the portals and what they portend for us.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what I could do? What do you think about this? I could kind of set up a scenario,
Mhm.
and so that your listeners, viewers, could kind of follow along with this. And um, there's a question for each portal.
Oh,
And
okay.
okay, so and the question may or may not make sense at this point, but I'll explain each of the portals as we go through them, and then maybe give a couple examples. Maybe between us we have some examples. I'll just say that this is very real stuff. I've had people tell me that they recognize these portals in their lives and didn't know that they were connected, and just didn't have a way of putting it together for themselves. So it's kind of created a coherency for some people. It's like, oh, this really makes sense. So the first portal is called sacred holding.
Hmm.
Okay, and that's the question is. Let me read this. Let me just go back. If you'd want to think about something in your life that is not resolved at this point, something that you've been kind of dealing with, something that you're unsure how to approach, you're not sure if you even know what to do, and if something comes up, a scenario comes up for you or a situation, you might just jot down a couple words to help you remember that. And then we can go into the portals themselves. And so the sacred holding is, how are you holding the situation or the issue? That's the beginning. How are you holding it? Now, what does that mean? Does it, are you holding it, kind of pushing it away, wanting it to go away? Are you holding it as something that has a meaning for you? Are you holding it as something that's just irritating and you want to get rid of? Or is it bringing up emotion? What's happening for you around it? How are you holding it? Are you holding it from a place of, this is maybe an opportunity to learn something, more about myself? Holding, and then I'll also ask, and how are you holding yourself? How are you holding yourself? That's
Explain
really
that.
key.
Yeah, explain that a little bit more.
Yeah. So holding is something that we don't really talk about in this kind of way, but it is an invisible part of our nature. It was we were held in the womb from so from the first moments of at least this iteration of life, we were held in the womb, and then however it is that we came through the birth canal or cesarean or however we were born, that then there was an environment that would provide what we call holding, that fulfill needs for physical care and emotional care, for giving guidance. We were used to having, to whatever degree that was a healthy holding. We had some experience around that. Now, it's very easy for us because of that was part of our early environment. We looked to the outside to be held. And then as we mature, that experience of holding, as we mature, that holding can be inner sourced.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what are we holding? Well, a sense of belonging. That's part of what happens in the early holding environment. We may not feel like we belong, or like, yeah, we really do belong. We might feel a sense of security. So our holding includes having a sense of security. Where do we look to that? Where do we look to get our sense of security from? Is it outside, or are we in contact with our own internal security? And the same with belonging. Do we look for belonging on the outside, or are we in contact with our interior capacity for belonging? It makes a huge difference.
Oh, those are profound differences.
Oh gosh, it makes a huge difference in how we show up in life. And in fact, and then the other part is really for nurturance. How do we experience, or what do we look for nurturance? Do we just kind of cut it off? Do we look externally for that? Or are we in contact with the capacity to nourish and nurture ourselves, love ourselves? Okay. So if we're looking to the outside, which we do through the first part of our life for the most part, and then we continue that, we're always going to feel off center. We're always going to feel at the kind of victimhood comes up a lot. We feel like we are at the effect of somebody else's decisions rather than connecting with our own inner authority. So if any of you have ever had the experience, and probably this is mostly across the board, where you felt like you walked away from yourself, you left yourself behind when there was a difficult conversation, or when somebody challenged your way of thinking, when something difficult, came up, and how did you deal with that? Were you able to connect with your own source of inner authority, or were you reacting to something external? And, I would say in our society, in the Western society, we're pretty used to reacting to external sources because we're trying to get a need met. And that need is something that we can source. It's not like we don't want to belong to a group of friends, of course, like you're not going to give that up. It's just that we're not depending upon the external sources to fulfill the needs that we have for belonging, safety, nurturance, and love.
Well, I would say we have an enormous amount of internal strength that a lot of us don't explore for many years or perhaps at all. And that internal strength leaves the external in the dust.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. Because now, if we can come into contact with that strength, with those inner capacities for being here, and being connected to the ground, being connected to our belly, connected to our body, actually, as well. It's like, I'm here. There's such resilience in that, and that's something that people are looking for. It's like, how do I get resilience? Well, it's right here. And it takes some work. It's like, it doesn't just automatically happen to say, I want to be resilient. So, we work with connecting again with our own body, our own substance, also with the earth. There's so many things that we can do in nature, connecting to nature, that helps us recognize our own inner nature. And so holding is the foundation for showing up in life. How we relate to ourselves. Do we experience ourselves as having self-worth? Our sense of identity is really connected to this. I'll just share an experience from my own life around this. And this has to do with the book that um, when I first was working with this book, or with this writing, with this symbol, it's like, well, who am I? Who am I to be doing this? And my sense of self was much more narrow. Like I was holding myself small. Okay. I was holding myself small. I wasn't recognizing that something was being called forth in me. And I really had to spend time, in quiet meditation, um, setting with this work inside of me and recognizing something is being asked of me here. This is mine to do. And I had to own that, because if I couldn't own that, I couldn't do it. And so that ownership, that internal ownership of um, what is calling to me, what enlivens me, what has meaning for me. I think of that as coming from the heart. Well, to some degree it does, but it's also this rooting being anchored in ourselves and in the earth itself is very powerful to support our sense of holding and just noticing when we walk away from ourselves, when we leave ourselves behind, and then we feel terrible, like, why didn't I say this? Why didn't I make this known? Why did I even know myself? So part of this is, we're getting to know ourselves more. We're really coming back into a deeper connection with ourselves.
And I think getting to know yourself can sometimes be surprising. I know I went through a period where I went from really severe illness and disability to flying high performance sailplanes. I didn't happen overnight. It took a little time, but the
Oh, I love
transition
it.
between the two was so unbelievable that I really discovered within myself a sense of adventure that is absolutely critical to me. And I didn't know it was there before. I didn't recognize it. Maybe I sensed it a little bit. I didn't recognize it. So I think these events can just really blow your world wide open.
Yeah, yeah. And that's actually what's needed, I think, right now, because our world is being kind of blown open anyway, that it's changing. And so how do we prepare, ourselves for this so that we can live with purpose and joy and energy and what is ours to do? And this is the real foundation. In the first chapter of my book, um, it's called "Just Who Do You Think You Are?"
Oh, I like that. Well, and I think purpose and joy comes from within. So it can exist no matter what is going on around us. When we find
That's
that
right.
energy, it's independent of whatever the world does.
Now, isn't that an amazing thing to have that be independent of whatever is going on around us? Most people think that and that's kind of the victim who might not want to talk about it, but we're here, so we're talking about it. That if something happens, we think, oh, it has something to do with me, or that I'm being done to, rather than that is happening in the world, and that's not mine. I don't have to get so engaged with it, so tied up with it. And um it's called spiritual autonomy, actually, what you're just talking about. That's a term that I'm familiar with. Spiritual autonomy, that I am not, my life is not conditional upon what other people think. It's not conditional upon what other people do. I'm part of it. I'm part of the world. I'm still part of it. And my life is not conditioned or conditional. And that's,
One of my favorite quotes is be in the world, not of it.
yeah, I know. I love that too. And that takes some sitting with and recognizing the power of that quote, the power of not having my sense of self, my emotional state, um, my actions dependent on what's happening around me. And we're seeing a lot of conditional responses in the world today. There's just because well, they did that, so we're going to do this, and it's just this constant kind of reactivity and tit for tat. And boy, that doesn't help us move forward, doesn't help us grow. It kind of takes us down a rabbit hole.
What's the next portal? Sacred trust. Talk a little bit about sacred trust and how that comes into play.
Yeah. So sacred trust, all of us, it's a general statement, but I think it's probably true. All of us have been disappointed by something that we trusted. Outside of us, institutions are, we're finding out, oh my God, they're fraudulent. People are fraudulent. They're doing terrible things. We've been disappointed in ourselves or by ourselves, by some of our decisions. I've been disappointed in myself for sure. And so we're looking at what I would call the finite level of life, like the content, our history, kind of our linear experience of life, the content of our lives. And trust asks us to open up to what else is here. And if we look around, we notice that, oh my gosh, there's a lot happening in life. There's a lot changing. And guess what? Pat, you and I are here. And so are your listeners and viewers. You're here. You're here for a reason. And so the question I would ask, going back to the situation you might have jotted down, what do you trust about yourself, the situation, or your life journey and your life journey? What do you trust about your life journey? And so trust is really fundamental to the way we approach life. Holiness is foundational to how we relate to ourselves. Trust is foundational to how we orient to life, approach life, and our relationship to how life is. That is, it's change, the dynamism of life. You can't deny it. Things are changing all the time. It's very hard to predict what's going to happen next at any level of life. So what is it that we can trust in that? And you might wonder, because we have had misplaced trust, but have we trusted ourselves and our place in this moment, our own journey? I can talk about the book, but I'm going to share a story. Actually, this is in the book, but this was so profound for me to get this. I experienced the earthquake in San Francisco a long time ago, 1989. I can feel it still. I have such vivid memories of it. I was at the university. I was teaching. My office mate and I were in our office, and we started feeling these tremors. And this was not like, I was kind of used to the earth moving, but it was like rolling. We looked out to the hall, and the hall was going like this, like, And so we got under the door jamb, which was what we were supposed to do with it. I don't know if it's still true, but what we were told to do at the time. And I don't think I was breathing, and I'm pretty sure I had a mouthful of words. Keith, my office mate, is great. He's very calm, Canadian guy. He's really calm. And he said, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." Well, I was fortunate because I was able to call my parents in the Midwest, because I knew they were watching. My dad was watching the World Series, which was being held in San Francisco at the time.
I remember that.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
I got through, and I said, "Dad," I said, "we're in an earthquake. I'm okay. I got to hang up." And then I found out my husband, who was in a high rise in San Francisco, he was okay. He was swaying back and forth. So I drove home, and the highway was buckling, and it was going very slow. It was everybody was shaken because it was so major. I mean, hundreds of people died, thousands of people were displaced. The bridge came down. I mean, it was horrendous. And I got home. It's like I looked around, looked like, at least on that quick visual, our house is okay. Thank you. So we live next to some open space, and I went out. I fell on my knees and I started crying. And I felt like my trust had just been shattered. And my trust, and I always thought that this ground was solid. I thought I was safe there. I had this whole concept like I'm safe on this land. And so I was really distraught on a personal level for quite a while. And then it occurred to me, I think I confused trust with something else. I think I confused it with assumptions. And my assumption was that the earth would stay as it had been, as I had known it. Well, duh. I happen to live where there are earthquakes, but beyond that, yes, the land does shake, it does move, it does crack, it does open up, it does all kinds of things happen in the land. And it was my assumption, or my hope, I guess, that everything would be okay. So I realized I was trusting maybe an assumption rather than trusting life to be as it is. And that really shifted for me because I started really recognizing how much change there is. And then, now it's like it's undeniable changes in everything from, weather, politics, racial stuff, economy, housing. I mean, there's
our digital
education.
lives are changing us. I mean, everything is.
Yeah, and everything is changing. So we shouldn't be surprised, right? And so, I guess then the question is, how do I become more, experience my own adaptability? How do I experience my own guidance, my own inner knowing? So this connects to holding, but it takes it to another level. How do I connect to my inner guidance? Because that guidance, wherever that comes from for you, that internal guidance is with discernment. I mean, if we're trusting, if we're trusting something out of our ego, that's probably, like my car is not going to, have a flat tire or something, then that probably isn't trustworthy. But what is trustworthy in life? And there's so much that is trustworthy. And if we can approach it from recognizing things are changing, I trust change will happen. I may not like it. I may not like the change. In fact, there's a lot of change that I'm not really particularly thrilled with, but it is. And so what's my relationship to that? And so assumptions and our preferences, if we want to just trust our preferences, that's all they are. They're just ideas about how things should be rather than how they are. So we're coming into a different kind of relationship with just that, Pat, how things actually are. And then being able to make decisions from a deeper place within about, well, what is my capacity here? What is being called forth for me? Is there anything being called forth for me?
Is there a higher calling to trust, if you will, that is maybe spiritual in nature that helps you navigate these things?
Well, it is spiritual. And what I didn't really say is that these four portals live in what we can call the finite dimension of life. Mm-hmm. And that finite dimension is our kind of our day-to-day mm-hmm. living, what we may pay attention to. We're all pretty familiar with the finite, and the finite changes, right? The finite changes. And the finite is also, where we have our ideas, personality shows up and tries to maybe take charge. We think a lot of stuff is based on the past, how we would, oh, I remember that, and so it must be true for now. Mm-hmm. Or we might be oriented toward the future, how things should be. And then this vertical line, now we have these horizontal lines. There's this vertical line that goes through us. And that's how it shows up in the symbol. But it goes through us in our body. And so these connections. these connections, and these intersections. And what I call that area around these intersections is where the finite and the infinite converge. So the infinite is, our essence, our being, what is essential nature, presence, and that just is. So the more that we can, this work involves letting go of some things that maybe we've held on to that no longer serve, but also opening to our capacities and our capacity to experience more wholeness, both our finite and infinite nature, both being active, both being engaged, gives us a bigger picture. And it allows us then to relax a little more, to rest in what really is happening, even when it's difficult. And of course, there's some things we got to move fast if there's a fire approaching or whatever. There's some things that we need to move really quickly into. And, it's interesting hearing some people talk about actually being caught in the fire in LA. And what came next was, I can't believe it. All these people showed up to be supportive and helpful. It's like, I wouldn't have ever known that about any of these people, so like there's something else happening besides what's happening in our head. And I think it opens us to a more expanded experience of the life that we're living, of the universe we're in.
That kind of naturally leads into the next portal, which is connectedness.
Yeah. So connectedness. This is our heart space. And the heart's confusing a lot of times. And in fact, part of in the book, I talk about which heart are we talking about. I talk about 4 levels of heart consciousness, 4 levels of heart awareness and experience. And so, for some people, the heart is it's not that we really want to close it, but we defend ourselves. We defend our way of being. We defend our ideas. We defend being vulnerable. We defend against a lot. So that's an area that we probably all know about. All the way through, understanding, experiencing our feelings and realizing, feelings are, and they come through. I have a couple of friends right now going through a lot of grief and loss, and recognizing, say, there's grief here, but there's also something else. I'm also in contact with something else. Like I'm okay, or I'm good, and there's goodness in the world. And so being able to experience more than just what we think, a feeling can really get us tied down. And then, this is also the center of truth. The heart is a center of truth. So we really get connected to what is so true within us. And this is another source of guidance. So when I talk about connectedness, I'm not talking about just like, hey, Pat, hi, it's good to see you. Nice that we're connected. Well, we are, but there is, what am I connecting from? And am I connecting from an idea about who you are, Pat? Am I connecting from a place like, well, yeah, okay, yeah, Pat's here. And so it's a lot of other things, it's distraction. Am I connecting from my heart? And so our heart is the center of how we can experience true connectedness. And it's, we're connecting with things that we might not think we can. Like, one of my favorite things is to feel that sense of connectedness to trees. I love nature, and I can feel the sense, like a tree's essence, and connect with that. I've got a kitty. We sure connect from our hearts. I feel her heart a lot, and it's like my heart knows, but my head can't know. So
that's a really important point, actually. that heart knowledge is
Yeah.
experiential. You can read books all day long, but it doesn't substitute for experiential connection or wisdom or knowledge. It just
Yeah. That's absolutely true. And, you know, um, the heart is something that we're pretty used to having maybe some filters down around because we get scared. We get scared
well,
that
letting your heart
somehow
hurts.
our heart hurts. And I'll tell you what, there's always going to be hurt. There's always going to be hurt, no matter how much you try to defend it or defend against it. And defending against it makes it hurt even more in ways that you can't know now. You know, people at the end of their life, one of the things they say, I wish I would have been more open-hearted,
Hmm.
because I missed so much, you know. And so this isn't something that, we're talking about it, but it is an experience, and it is coming in more in contact. And, just a simple way of inviting yourself into your heart is putting a couple of fingers or your hand over the center part of your chest, because we're talking about the spiritual heart too. But just like to let it know you're here and that you are open to it. You're listening, kind of listening to what does your heart want to convey to you. And it will talk in different, you might get words, but you might get images, you might get sensations, you might get symbols. It has a different language. Aren't we fortunate that there are more ways to communicate? And if we can just tune into that, the heart, if any of you play an instrument, particularly, any instrument, and you go to a concert and the oboe plays its sound to start the orchestra or the symphony or whatever group, or it might be the violin, depends on what's in the group, and then each instrument attunes to that. It's like we have our heart song here to attune to, and listening to it, musicians listen very, very carefully to their own instrument to have it be in sync with the other instruments. And so, and they're maybe all over the place. It's all this cacophony. And then when everybody lands, it's like, ah, we're ready to go now. We can go. And in a way, tuning into, and I just am using instrument as a metaphor, but to this precious heart that has so much to offer. It is a source of deep wisdom and connectedness to the higher realms, to the divine. So it's not always easy. It takes grounding, and it takes trust in the heart, because a lot of people don't trust their hearts. So see that these portals really do loop into each other, but that foundation is holding and trust. And now connecting, what are you connecting from? And I in looking back, I could see how I was kind of defending against what is the truth that wants to come through this work as much as I could know it. I don't claim to be the holder of all the truth around this work by any means. I think there's a lot more that will be forthcoming. But as I could know it, there's places I'll tell you a place. I got the message. What am I supposed to be writing about? What is wanting to come through? And then when I got the message, well, fundamentally, this book is about love. And I went, oh, oh my gosh, that's what, not like romantic love. It's like, this is love. It's coming through in these different ways. And when I could actually let myself open to that and be with that and embrace that, it changed. That was another thing that really changed within me. So you might think about your own situation. Um, what are you connecting from? And how are you holding it? You know, what are you trusting about it? What do you trust about your own heart?
That's a big question.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah, it is because I think everybody's heart is defended to some degree, and yet across all the literature you can look at, the ultimate human quest is love.
It is. It is. It really is. And what do people really, really desire? And that is love. And it's to, you know, to be loved, yes, and to love oneself.